My name is Charles Williams. Born January 21st, 1984, and from Georgetown. My dad, Charles Williams, and my mom, Ernestine Williams. My dad was born in Georgetown, and my mom was born in Andrews, South Carolina. My oldest brother, Keith Williams, and my youngest brother, Michael Williams. So I'm the middle. I'm the middle child. Yes, my wife, Shannon Williams. I met her in college. I met her my junior year, and we've been together 10 years. We've been together ever since. I went to college in Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia, and went there in 2002 after graduating from Carvers Bay High. And then so going back to college, I graduated in 2006. She has an artistic eye. She has an interior design degree, and so right now she's a project manager for a healthcare design company in Charlotte, North Carolina. Yeah. Yeah, so she critiques my work all the time, all the time. Gullah, what Gullah means to me is African roots. It's, for me, historical. It is something that I have used for inspiration in my work. Understanding the history of Gullah, from the slavery and the rice fields, those are things that I've painted. Being from the low country, Georgetown, you see the rice fields, you see the marsh, the pluff mud, all of those things was interesting and intriguing to me. And just to imagine people being amongst that every single day and having a task to do. For me growing up, that was something that I wanted to discover. And I just found ways, I found that my way of understanding it and exploring that was through painting and drawing. So I'm a contemporary landscape painter, and I paint low country scenes, water, and it is just to open viewers to see a different perspective in another world, just like I'm looking at the Gullah culture. Family, being around family. I had a big family, so on my mom's side, she has 10 siblings. And then on my dad's side, he has 4. So it was any holiday, it was getting together, eating. Even on Sundays, it was eating. It just seemed that food brought everyone together. And there was always someone looking out for you. For me, I'm old school, so it was that the community helped raise us, so we couldn't get away with things. You know, so a tradition for me would be getting up early Sunday morning, going to Sunday school, staying there all day through church till 1, going to my grandma's house, eating Sunday dinner, and staying there until 6, my brother and I, we would watch WCW with at my grandma's house, and my parents would be there, and then we would, flip channels back and forth while my grandma was like, turn back. We're like, well, Grandma, we want to see WCW. But there were certain shows that my grandma wanted to see on Sundays, and so that was every Sunday. And we would go home early enough just to, wash up and go to bed. So that was a staple for me. And also it was the beginning of me understanding Christianity and spirituality. And also too, applying that to my work. When you have 18 plus years of that, it really can shape and mold you. Well, first of all, my dad, my parents. I mean, my mom, she was a strong woman. So her faith in Christ was something that I didn't understand, but as time went on, I understood. And it showed me character, principles and values. On my dad, with my dad, the skills that he had was business aspects, communicating aspects, principles that, when you speak to someone, you give them a firm handshake, you look them in their eyes. Those are some of the skill sets that I obtained, and my brothers, that was very helpful. When it came to outside of that artistically, meeting Christy Weaver, my mom, second grade, Christy Weaver taught at Kensington Elementary, and my mom would volunteer. And so she had me around Christy Weaver, just so Christy Weaver could show me technically art skills. And it just flourished from there to the Gifted and Talented program, to wherein I met also Bruce Chandler, who was a watercolorist in Georgetown. She was very pivotal for me in my life, and gave me a lot of skill sets that added on with my parents. The Bruce Chandler would literally drive me to the Columbia Museum with her and talk to me in the car on some of the business aspects, as well as teach me private lessons. So I had that earlier on. And it was so special. Also, my high school art teacher, Heath Hampton, he and Bruce Chandler and Christy Weaver, they teamed up to where I had this circle. I had this circle of talent. I had this circle of skill set. I had this circle of trust. So all of that went back to the skill sets that my parents were instilling in me. And it made sense. It also kind of confirmed that, okay, my parents knew what they were talking about. As a child, you think, well, eh. So I learned early on to listen, to be observant. And I think that helped in some of the success that I've had with art. So that continued to wherein I got scholarships at SCAD. My work was selling in the community. Businesses in Georgetown were very supportive to allow me to sell my work, and all of that money went towards an account to wherein that money wasn't spent, wasn't used on toys or going out and having fun. It all went to SCAD. So those skill sets, like I said, it shaped and molded me, but it also gave me confidence. To wherein SCAD was hard, yes, but it gave me the belief that, okay, not just I have this circle that was, formed and put together as a team, I've got a community. And that's just special, that's great. And I try to give back and share with kids, people that are interested in art, some of the opportunities that I've had, I'm fortunate to have, to give to them earlier on, because information changes the situations of a person, and I had those opportunities, and it did change. Recently, Mary White and Jonathan Green, they have been an added plus to my circle, and even meeting them in 8th grade, it was like, okay, at that moment, this was like, this was the model that I wanted to follow. Okay. As far as skill sets, as far as having that total package of being community oriented, of being grounded, as being respectful and personable, but then also having this ability to create something out of nothing. It was just mind-blowing. I was the odd one. I was the odd one because I questioned a lot of things. I had this curiosity to wherein if someone said to go left, I would question why. So I guess I would say that's that middle child syndrome too. But I would get in trouble a lot, not for misbehaving, but just more so for not paying attention, because somewhere on my desk or on my book or on paper I would doodle and draw, you know, my friends or the teacher, to wherein she would ask me a question, I would know. And a lot of times I missed out on recess because of it. Now to me, I didn't care because I got to draw. But you know, those are some of the things that that was the trouble that I got into. Besides mom and dad, because they're mom and dad, I would say Bruce Chandler and Heath Hampton. And I say that because Bruce Chandler was the first successful artist in my eyes, and she still is, that really took time and believed in me more so than others. And Heath Hampton, he was my high school art teacher. And going back to the oddball, I knew early on, okay, drawing was something that I was good at. But painting, that wasn't my strong suit. So I would draw pieces and works, and he would sit there in art class and mix the colors for me. And it would almost be like coloring in a line. So he would say, okay, put red here, you know, put blue here. And then he would sit with me and explain to me why to put, okay, purple on top of red. And that was like my first introduction to color theory. He took the time and sought out Bruce Chandler. Didn't ask for him to do that, but he did. And then when I met Bruce Chandler and started doing my own personal research on Bruce Chandler, and then seeing the works and the exhibitions that she's had, and her being a staple in the community, that was something amazing to me. You know, I remember her mural that she did in Walmart. I remember the mural she did on the steel mill. So it was like the community rallied behind that. So for me, that was like my first experience, just seeing like an artist just captivated the community. So those two were very pivotal, and they also helped me go to college. They knew that in order for me to continue to perfect my craft and to grow as an artist, I needed to go away. But then also keep in mind that as you go away and you learn things, you also have a duty to your community to come back and share some of those things, that knowledge that you learned. And I saw that and got that firsthand from Bruce Chandler. And even so, Heath Hampton, he didn't have to take those extra steps into research and find Bruce Chandler for me. Bruce Chandler didn't have to take me on those multiple car rides of going to competitions and talking to me about work and introducing me to other artists. So all of those moments, like I said, built up confidence and assured me that I could do it. So those two have been the ones for me. Well, talking about food, I mean, and the gathering aspect, my grandma on my mother's side, her father had a farm. Hated it, But every summer we were on the fields. We were in the fields. We were doing cropping tobacco. In the fall and the winters, we were picking sweet potatoes. My grandma had a garden, so we were doing cabbage. I mean, anything that was grown in the ground that you could eat, with her grandsons and grandkids, we were all there. So every summer, I spent my time with my grandma, and we were at the farm, on the fields. And so there was a lot of memories there with spending time with my family and my cousins, laughing, joking around, and of course having those big meals. So food really brought the family together. Well, there were things that my mom did, like, for example, she would say, well, if your hand itches, the palm of your hand itches, that means you're getting money soon. If your right eye jumps or something, that means someone's talking about you. There was one time when I think it was 12 or something like that, and I was playing at my grandma's house, and I stepped on a nail, and I didn't go to the doctor for it, but my grandma's on the one line. My mom's holding the phone, and my grandma's telling her what to do. So she took a tweezer, and she did peroxide and some other stuff, and she said, "Go get some spider webs," and pack some spider webs in the hole. And I'm like, what? So anyway, so those are, to me, I guess, to me, some of the old superstitions and things that I kind of experienced. But those were always, to me, like stories, because like I said, I was very curious. So particularly my grandfather, on my dad's side, I would always hear him if it was sunny outside and it was raining. He would say, "The devil's beating his wife behind the door." I'm like, what does that mean? So he would sit there and explain things like that. So yeah. Or my grandma would say, "Well, it's gonna rain today." I'm like, "Well, how do you know, Grandma?" "Well, my knee's hurting." It was like she could tell the weather from her knee, and she had arthritis and stuff. But I'm like, I just kind of shook my head. But what it did, it just kept me wondering, and it kept me curious, and it kept me wanting to. That's funny, because like when I think about, because my wife laughs at me, I watch ETV, Discovery Channel, and mostly the Weather Channel. Like, I like the Weather Channel, and I tell her it's from me growing up, being around my grandmother and my grandfather, and the weather was like a huge thing to talk about. If you're sitting on a porch, or if you're around family, and you're just kind of like the fly on the wall, the weather was like the first thing that they would, "Oh, it's gonna rain today," well, and then everything else was surrounded by the weather. It was just curious. I mean, it was just funny and curious to me that when I would see my grandmother or grandfather walk up to another person that they knew, that's what they would say. "How's it going? It's gonna rain today. What were you doing during the storm last week?" It was just, the weather was very, like a staple. Yes. Rice was with every meal. Okay. With every meal. It's funny, I still burn rice today. I do. They have the bag ones where you could just pop it in the microwave, but it's not the same. It's not the same. So, and the reason why, because I know that I burn it, because I don't stay there and watch it. And, it's funny, I would watch my grandma growing up. She would have like this little stool by the stove. She'd sit there and stir the rice. She'd have the TV in the corner, and she'd be watching her stories. She never left the food. She never really measured anything either. Everything was love. My grandma, on my dad's side, she would make cakes for the community. So I'd watch her cook. And especially with the cake, she'd let me eat the batter and stuff like that. But I would always help her. So the patience, love, skill that she gave towards, the attention that she gave towards the food, I got that really, really early on, to where I applied that to my work. I always watched her when someone would come to her and say, "Oh, Gladys, that pie you made was just phenomenal," or, oh, the cake that you made was just, oh, and she would make jelly layered cakes and all that stuff. But when she got the compliments, she lit up. And it just made me think the time, the attention, the patience, the detail, it was all there. And I experienced that, and I watched her. So while she was, you know, back and forth watching stories, you know, she loved Young and the Restless, so she'd say, tell me what Victor's doing. Okay, Victor's doing this, Grandma. And she's like, tell your brother don't run through the house, you're gonna make my cakes fall over. Just things like that. So the attention to detail and the patience is something that I applied to my work from having that experience. Yeah, but food was pivotal to me. History is something that, like I said, I explored. I was watching ETV the other day, and it was a segment on African Americans, many rivers to cross. And that, along with in school, learning about African Americans, slaves, Gullah culture, things that they had to, I would say, change to wherein it wasn't always sad, it wasn't always depressing. Things that they had to manipulate to make the best of. Those were just things that I all looked at and thought and wondered. I'm a very curious person, and I always try to find the meaning behind things. So it was 8th grade, and I met Jonathan Green. And for me, that was the first artist that I saw that really painted the Gullah culture and really loved it and was passionate about it. So after going to our class, went to see him in Charleston, and after seeing his work, it just made me even more curious about it. There's a lot of history in those fields. That's what my grandfather would say. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of achievements. There's a lot of changing turning points that the U.S. was built on. And we can't forget that. So for me, in my own way, in my own unique way, I try to, and when I started out, I tried to show a glimpse of that history, but in the present. The rice culture, I know firsthand, the patience and the love and the care that you had to make sure that it's right. I experienced that, but then reading, seeing the videos like ETV, the Many Rivers to Cross, it tied everything together. The Gullah culture is something that I believe that was something that they had to manipulate to connect with one another. It was something that I think that that feeling when you're sitting on the porch with your grandfather and he's saying a word that you're like, huh? What did you say? It's that, and they understood that. And I think too, the Gullah culture is something that it stands for identity. I think that, you know, during those times, they needed a sense of purpose and identity, and they wanted to feel connected. The rice fields and the rice as a food is, I think, a connection. And it's historical. And sometimes when I'm driving, even coming from Charlotte, or at the time when I was living in Florida, seeing the rice fields and coming over the bridge into Georgetown, it's a lot of wonder. It's a lot of wonder. And it captivates you. And I think there's not, there's not another, there isn't another place on earth that I think that captures this. Water. Water is the essence of renewal. Water is the essence of rebirth. Water is a source of life. From research that I've done pertaining to my exhibition here at Burroughs of Japam, water was, other than freedom, water was somewhat bondage. So there are many aspects and perspectives that water brings, but the most substantial is the freedom aspect, the freedom, the renewal, the rebirth, the cleansing. So in all my landscapes, you'll see you'll see water. That's me acknowledging, the talent that I know that God has given me. It's almost like you show your respects. When you meet an older person, you say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, or really anybody. Yes, sir, no, sir. That's what I was raised on. You're showing respect. I'm showing respect by using water in my landscapes. And then growing up in church, my mom would take us to church. You know, even though I didn't understand it, but I was baptized. She gave me the look from the choir. She pointed, and that meant, get up, go to the front of the church, you're getting baptized. And yeah, I said, Mom, later on, I said, Mom, why didn't you let me pick and choose? Like, why didn't you let me volunteer myself to go instead of, she said, honey, I knew that later on you would understand. Simple as that, simple as that. And I did. So that is water has been very significant to me, and it plays a big part of my Christianity growing up in Baptist church. I think some of the changes that I see is the passion and the joy of getting together and that togetherness, that community passion of that old school way of the community raises a child, and the village takes a village to I feel like that has been lost, and maybe that's because of technology and the sign of the times, but some of those old, I say old in a good way, some of those old traditions I think need to be revived, because that's how I made it. You know how like what the old folks would say, son, you made it. And when I was growing up, I heard, now when you make it, don't forget. Don't forget what? Right. And so I think that has been, I feel like has been lost. I think people understand Gullah and they know where it comes from, and I think that they can appreciate it, but the passion, there's a difference. We can celebrate it and we can rejoice it and we can understand it and we can appreciate it, but to be passionate about something, you have to be consistent. That consistency, you have to understand the skills, you have to understand the reasoning, you have to understand the psychology behind it all. Once you understand, then you can apply the consistency with the passion. And then Gullah celebrations won't just be a day of celebration. It will be more of a daily, a way of life. A way of life. And it's not that we have to speak like the Gullah culture, but it's it's the foundations and the traditional methods that they applied and use with their life that we can apply to our own. So the exhibit at Burroughs and Chapin Museum is called Swim, An Artist's Journey. The history, I'll start from the beginning because there are many perspectives. When I was 11, I went to the state park here in Myrtle Beach, and I was rebellious and I was jumping waves with my cousins, and I got taken under. 5-10 minutes later, I wound up looking at my father and my uncle on the beach. And that was a traumatic experience to me that with that happening, along with growing up in the South and hearing stereotypes of African Americans not being able to swim, the reasonings behind that, I heard that. And like I said, for me as a child, always questioning things. So I continued to get into the water and had other accidental drownings. And I took swimming lessons. I didn't pass beginning swimming lessons. And so 3 years ago, I had another accidental drowning in the pool. And that, after having that, I said to myself, I gotta fix this. Going back to being spiritual, it's not a coincidence that I'm here. And I felt led to really dive into myself, of exposing myself to something that I've been wrestling with. Growing up, I thought swimming was, if I didn't know how to swim, knowing how to swim was pretty cool, I thought. But growing up around other peers, it was like, they do that stuff. So I wanted to have an exhibition to put myself out there and use myself as an example to say, this is my step of acknowledging my fear. And I'm going to do this by creating this exhibition and making a step towards progressing to eventually overcome my fear. And maybe I won't, but at least take swimming lessons. And before I die, learn how to swim. So I use swimming as a vehicle for me personally because that's what I went through. And that's what I experienced. And so when I got in touch with the museum, they wanted me to do this. And I said, well, I have another perspective. So I would go online and read articles about kids fighting and shooting and killing over sneakers, Jordans and Nikes. And I said to myself, well, how can I place a value on swimming, which from research, for every one white child that dies or drowns, 2 to 3 black kids drown each year. The percentages are high. So I thought, how can I show less value on materialistic things and more value on self? More value on self goes back to Gullah culture, goes back to African American culture, the history, the community aspect, family. Those are some of those values that I wanted to expose and show through the works and say, look, it's not worth it. And as it developed over and over, I just kept feeling compelled to tell my personal story. So after talking to the museum, they said, this should be about you. There's so much meat and potatoes in your story, more so than statistics. Your story is more universal. So in the first room, you have a series of a submerging, going underwater. And on top of that, all the paintings are large. The fear that I had took over me, and it was large enough to where the stereotypes on top of that kept me from making the same mistakes. And obviously I wasn't learning, obviously I wasn't growing. And over time I've developed where I get panic attacks. As I'm talking to you now, you probably can notice and see the change in my voice, and as I'm talking to you, I'm counting. The sounds of the waves of the oceans are playing now, and sometimes it's traumatic. So with that being said, this was appropriate for me to do. We live on the coast. We live by water. Kids grow up playing on rivers and they don't know how to swim, and we have accidents that happen all the time. We had one that stuck out to me in the area. We had a Sandy Island accident. When I went last year, as I was developing the show, I went over to the dock, Sandy Island, the dock, to take the boat to Sandy Island. And I walked out on the dock. I got this spirit, this like riveting spirit of ancestors and culture, and it was, to me, somewhat haunting. So that confirmed me that going in this personal direction and sharing this story was the best choice to make for this exhibition. So although I'm using water as a vehicle to share my personal story, this is just about acknowledging fear. You may have a fear of heights, but I'm showing you how I'm taking a step towards acknowledging my fear and then moving towards that. And this is hopefully a way that people can see that, hey, we all have fears, but if I acknowledge it, it could bring us together, which goes back to the Gullah culture, which goes back to, my grandparents and family, togetherness, community. That's what I had firsthand. Even growing up in Georgetown County, community. So this all ties in. I've only been painting, I would say, 10 years or so. So all of these are done in oil. There are 8 large 6 by 8 feet oil paintings, and then there are 40 oil studies. So water is very fluid. Water has this human-like characteristic to where you can, feel overwhelmed. You can feel that it's alluring. You can feel that it's captivating. Water teaches you how to respect. It teaches you to respect it. It's spiritual too. So it has all these perspectives and these characteristics that I chose surfaces to mimic that. So I have 30 studies, which are done on mylar, and mylar is like this slick, waxy surface, almost like butcher paper, a meat cutting paper. And so when you work on it, when you apply paint to it, it runs off. You have to continue to apply paint into the same area to where you're building up the paint. And it's almost like you're modeling and molding on this surface, on this waxy surface. So each time that you apply the layer, it gets stronger and stronger to where you can apply heavier brush strokes. So the mylar paper mimicked the fluidness of the ocean, of the water. I did 10 oil studies of the night where I just painted on panel 12 by 12. I painted oil on panel in black, and once I let it dry for about 30 minutes, I took a palette knife and I would carve in to the 12 by 12s. And so what that mimicked for me is when I would go out into the ocean and I would photograph the ocean, I would have a flashlight in one hand and my camera in my right hand. And so I would stand, I would say about knee or waist deep, you know, into where, and I can do like a 360 turn. So each turn, I would click the camera. The camera would have to focus on the light wherever the flashlight was shining. And so when I would look out into the distance, your eyes would have to adjust. You could hear the sound, but your eyes would have to adjust on seeing waves crashing, folding, tumbling over. So these studies, these 10 nighttime studies, is what that mimics. Black on black, when you see them far away, they look like black squares. When you go up close to them, you can see how the light bounces off. You can see how when the moon shines out in the ocean, like the light reflects on it. And so I wanted to mimic that. So yeah, it's what you can't see, that when you get up close to it and you have some sort of light, you can then see the formations of the ocean and of the water. You know, I always, when I meet people, I try to treat them, not try, I make it a point to treat them as if I want to be treated. That's the TLC, the tender loving care, that I got growing up from family members, that I got from my mom and dad, and that I got from the circle that was formed for me to be able to be successful. So that's how I try to live life and treat people when I meet them, even if I don't know you. I don't, a lot of times, I would say 9 times out of 10, I give hugs, then shake hands. Because when you open yourself up to people, whether you don't know them or not, it allows them to say, okay, I can be myself, I can be comfortable, I can trust this person, you know. And I think that that's something that we all should do.